In Lexington, South Carolina, teen twins Darlene and Charlene Shuler fantasized about being rich. Once they hit high school, they committed to keep pace with their stylish peers, whose trendy wardrobes they envied. But wishing and dreaming and hoping couldn't make it so. No matter how hard they tried to compete, they could never have enough, be enough. They swore one day they would have all the luxuries they dreamed of, and everyone in the town of Lexington would know their names. Cut to Lexington, South Carolina, 1997. Charlene and Darlene had graduated from Clemson University and were both married. For several years, the church-going desperate housewives tended their homes, growing ever more bored and frustrated with their middle-class lives. Eventually, though, without any real concept of how to operate a business, they decided to strike out together as entrepreneurs and chose hardware as their means to the wealthy lifestyles they had always craved. So, Charlene Shuler Corley and Darlene Shuler Wooten founded C&D Distributors. A few of the larger items in their inventory included plumbing fixtures and light bulbs, but the bulk of the business was small hardware. They started selling their nuts, bolts, washers, and screws, working long hours for short pay. It didn't take long until they grew bored with hardware. They had to find a way to make more money. Eventually, they devised a plan to acquire government contracts, selling their hardware to the Defense Department. They believed that expanding their business could prove lucrative, and both Charlene and Darlene were certain that military contracts would be their ticket to the big time. But it didn't happen that way. Their orders remained small, generally just a few nuts and bolts at a time. The twins were spending long hours away from their families, still trying to keep up appearances, those pesky Joneses silently taunting them. A few months into the startup, it was discovered that they had made a clerical error in the books. A small order on a government contract should have been shipped for the nominal fee of $5 US. However, the incorrect amount of $5,000 was invoiced. Due to the billing setup at the Defense Department, C&D Distributors received payment for the hardware, plus $5,000 for shipping a handful of washers that cost 19 cents each. Upon discovering the staggering oversight, the twins returned the money, but the temptation of all that easy cash tickled their brains. There appeared to be a serious flaw in the automated payment system at the Department of Defense. If the inventory requested was deemed priority, it was approved without question. It was then the twins realized they could charge any amount they wanted for shipping, and the government, with its undiscovered loophole, would pay the charge. Months crawled into years, and the business owners thrived. They started small at first, charging a few $100s for shipping small orders. Eventually, though, their boldness knew no bounds, and they finally achieved the wealth and status they had always craved. By this time, they were the Joneses, and they practically dared anyone to try to keep up. They bought matching luxury cars and fancy designer clothes. Their armoires were brimming with pricey jewelry. They spent lavishly on gifts for others as well. There was no end in sight to this extravagant display of good fortune, by this time earned on the backs of American soldiers. Following the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the U.S. military forces went balls to the wall in defending American soil. The Defense Department deemed virtually every hardware order to be priority and rubber-stamped C&D invoices without delay. Among the charges submitted by C&D Distributors were an $8.75 elbow pipe with a shipping charge of $445,640. There was an invoice for a machine thread plug valued at $10.99 with a shipping fee of $492,000 and change. And 6 machine screws costing $1 apiece were shipped to the troops at a cost of $403,436. So, as American soldiers slept on the ground in tents and fought overseas, Charlene Corley and Darlene Wooten were living their best life. Now, we could all pretty much guess this wasn't going to end well for the tricky twins. We've all heard the platitudes. The love of money is the root of all evil. Money can't buy happiness. Well, I for one would happily test that theory. I'm pretty sure money can buy happiness, at least for a little while. And that's how it played out for Charlene and Darlene. Life was an adventure. Then, as they had with so many other things in the past, they became restless and dissatisfied. They were no longer happy with their modest family homes, so they purchased multiple vacation properties. One luxury car wasn't enough, so they purchased matching Mercedes, both silver, along with a fleet of assorted new vehicles numbering 10 in all. They took lavish family vacations and returned to Lexington to divide their time between C&D and their new business, a trendy cookie shop called Dough and Cookie. However, months later, it had become clear they were eating up the profits along with the chocolate chips, as both Shar and Dar had packed on the pounds. No matter, they simply bought larger designer clothes and eventually scheduled matching tummy tucks. They attracted attention wherever they went, a success story by just about anyone's measure. Then, along with the envelopes stuffed with fat checks, they found a letter that would change their lives forever. In September 2006, an administrative staffer at the DoD red-flagged an invoice from C&D Distributors. It was a duplicate. Fueled by greed, the twins had gotten careless. They had mistakenly submitted 2 identical invoices for payment. Now, had it been an invoice for hardware with a shipping cost of a few dollars, the scheme might have continued indefinitely. But again, their hubris was unmatched. They submitted 2 identical invoices for a handful of 19-cent washers with a total shipping charge of $998,000. The staffer set about reviewing the C&D account and discovered dozens of excessive charges. It was obvious this was no oversight or clerical error. This was blatant fraud. Over the course of 9 years, beginning in 1997, the Shuler sisters had defrauded the U.S. Department of Defense of $20.5 million. They had submitted for payment 112 fraudulent invoices for what was estimated to be $150,000 worth of hardware and fixtures shipped to troops serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. The DoD sent over 30 letters to C&D requesting a meeting to clarify the exorbitant charges, but their attempts were ignored. The twins shut down their business and hoped that writing a check for restitution would satisfy the collection efforts. But it was too late. It was October 2006, and Darlene was alone when federal investigators knocked on her door. She was flustered and frightened. Like an animal trapped in a cage, she stammered and backpedaled. She offered to pay back the money she claimed was received in error and begged for a future meeting when Charlene could be available. The agents were unwavering. They informed Darlene that criminal charges would be filed, then they left her. A panicked Darlene Wooten phoned her twin, who tried in vain to talk her off the ledge. But Darlene was inconsolable. She fled to her vacation home, where she committed suicide. She left behind a note for her family and a check written to the Department of Defense in the amount of $4.5 million. When surviving twin Charlene was confronted by the investigators, there was no shame in her game. She blamed the entire scheme on her dead sister Darlene, claiming that it was she who managed the financial operations of the company. She added that Darlene had received more benefit than she had from the ill-gotten funds. Investigators rejected her claims, citing dozens of fraudulent invoices containing only Charlene's signature. In August 2007, Charlene Corley and C&D Distributors pled guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. Each carried a maximum sentence of 20 years. She was freed on bond pending sentencing. During the sentencing hearing in March 2009, Corley's attorneys asked the judge to consider her service to the community and spotless criminal history. They presented 8 character witnesses via video testimony asking for leniency, and Corley herself requested that she serve her time at a halfway house, which the judge rejected. Upon pleading guilty, she was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison and ordered to pay $15.5 million in restitution. Following the hearing, her possessions acquired by fraud were seized by the South Carolina U.S. Attorney's Office. Among the assets were 4 beach houses at Edisto Island, 5 businesses including the cookie store, and a $250,000 luxury box at the football stadium at Clemson, the twins' alma mater. Prosecutor Deborah B. Barbier, who represented the U.S. government at Corley's sentencing, said the list of assets comprised, quote, 10 pages, single-spaced. Charlene Shuler Corley served her time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Marianna, Florida. She was released on February 7, 2015.